So let's take care of the lightning setup. For this, let's maybe do another postage stamp node from our sky, or rather our clouds. So let's point this to our clouds, press Alt H to hide the input node, and I'll just drag this down below. Okay, and from here, maybe we just want to grab a couple of these nodes, so the shuffle and the unpremult. Let's place them down here. We probably don't really need the unpremult for this, so I'll just delete this, and I will maybe adjust the nodes placement here. And so let's shuffle out one of these lightning's passes. Okay, so any of these will be fine just to set this up, and when we created the setup we will be able to just duplicate this around and merge all of these together and then do our color grading after. But from here I will add a grade node, and for each of these individual passes that we shuffle out, we want to only affect their gain and maybe the gamma, so rather the luminance values. Okay, so I might want to just bring this down a little bit, and we will go one by one through each of these and decide which of these needed their gain and gamma adjusted. So what I want to do from here is I'll drop another grade node and I'll connect this here, and I will set the gain for this to 0, which essentially will turn this completely black, and I want to animate this mix value to go from 1 to 0. So I want to fade in this lightning and then fade it out. So we have to create a couple of keyframes, but instead of keyframing it directly inside of this mix value over here, I will create another node that controls these keyframes. So I will drop a no OP node, which is essentially just an empty node. This is like a null in Houdini. And I want to just simply create a custom value here. So I will right click and choose manage user knobs, and I will set add floating point slider, and I will rename this to value, and the label will be value only with a capital V. I'll hit OK, and now we will hit done, so we can animate this value here to control the mix value in our grading node. Okay, so let's just simply start at the beginning of the timeline. I will set a keyframe for 0. Let's set a key. Move forward just a few frames, set one for a keyframe for a value of 1. Then move forward a few more frames and then set one for 0. So we can go in our curve editor and we can see our values here. And this should be fine. We might want to add a couple of extra keyframes. So I want to add maybe one over here because I want this to decay a little bit faster over time. And maybe I can grab this keyframe, move these around, and we will see how this feels when we link up the expressions here and test it with our lighting animation. But maybe something like this will be fine for now. So now in order to link this keyframe, we can go to our grade node. And before that, let's actually go to this node and let's rename this to maybe LT and val. So lightning value. Okay, so now to reference this node, we can go inside this mix value over here, and you can press the equals sign on your keyboard to be able to enter the expression. To reference our value here, we first have to reference the node, so I will simply type lt val dot, and then we will grab the value that we just created. So the name was value. Okay, so now we can see if I hit OK, it creates this green line over here, which is essentially indicating our link, and we can press Alt T on the keyboard to hide this, but let's leave it on for now. And if I play my animation, we should see our keyframes in action. Okay, so this is the result we end up with. Now we want the reverse of this. We want this value to go from 1 to 0, so we can step inside our expression here, and to reverse this we can simply do 1 minus. So now essentially we can fade this in and then it fades out over time. So I think something like this should be fine. And what we can do now is we can cycle these keyframes. So let's maybe say that I want this fade in and fade out animation to happen once every like 60 frames. So during the duration, each lightning will have a chance to maybe come in around 2 or 3 times. So if I go back to my value here in the curve editor, I can grab these keyframes and right click, go to predefined and set this to loop. So our animation starts at frame 1, so I will leave the first frame of the loop at frame 1, and I want our first loop to end at a value of 60. Our timeline will reach the frame 60. This will our keyframes will start to repeat. So then I can hit OK, and we can see it over here, and maybe we can even preview this in our viewport. So let's see how this will look. Then at frame 60, we have another one of these pulses. And then at 120, we should have another one. All right, so I think this will be fine. We can always go back and readjust values as needed. And now to introduce a little bit of flickering to this, let's go ahead and edit our expression. And let's first place this value in between parentheses. And to create the flickering value, we can use a random expression. So from this, if I subtract another value generated by the random function, so I will type here random, and I want to generate one for each frame. So in between parentheses, I will type frame. Let's see what this will give us. Let's hit OK, and let's preview the animation now. We can see now that we have the flickering. So maybe this is a little bit too harsh. If we go to our curve editor, we can see that this is how our value looks over time. So we can see that maybe this is a little bit, has a little bit too much flickering. To smooth this out a little bit over time, let's go back inside here, and we can smooth out this value by simply dividing our frame value by a number. So if I divide this frame value over here in between parentheses by 2, we can see now that it's already looking a lot smoother. So depending on what kind of effect you're going for, you can either increase the frame value, like do a multiplication, but in this case we want to slow things down, so we will divide it instead. So by dividing it with a value of 2, I believe this will give us a nicer result. So I think something like this will be fine. Now I did a slight error here, and because our initial frame, our initial value is going from 1 to 0 rather than 0 to 1, we actually have to add this random on top of our value. So if I hit this to plus, then after our keyframe animation ends, we should have a black screen. So if I play the animation now, we should have the correct result. Okay, so we can see it's fading in, it's flickering, fading out, then fading in again when the keyframe starts to loop, and then also flickering at the same time. And we might actually want this to flicker a little bit faster, so let's maybe not divide this by a value of 2 here. Let's just try 1.5. Okay, so this should add a little bit more frequency to the flickering. Okay, so this looks fine.